Well, everybody, I'm Cantonese Cat. Hey, everybody, Cantonese Cat here. I'm going to be a little bit more whispery tonight. Mrs. Cat's sleeping again. I'm here making another video in the middle of the night just for fun. There are a few things that are in my mind I want to share with you. This is the IWM chart. IWM is the index fund, the ETF for the Russell 2000. It represents the smaller cap stocks. A lot of these smaller cap stocks, unlike the large cap stocks, they are just more likely to be leveraged. They are more likely to be in debt, and they are more cyclical. They follow more of a cycle behavior than, for example, QQQ that doesn't really follow the cycle as much, or even the S&P 500. They don't really follow the cycle as much as the IWM. They're extremely sensitive to economic cycles, and because of that, they really bounce from one support to another resistance very frequently and very violently. And that creates opportunity for a lot of people if you want to trade or if you want to ride up, from one cycle top to another cycle top. You can certainly, try to trade here if you can time things well. You can see the right, resistance and support zone and things like that. So what I'm trying to say here in this video, and I kind of alluded a little bit on the Triumphant live stream on Tuesday, I think November 2024 has a lot of similarities to what happened in November 2020. And that's not an easy statement to make because you're talking about November 2020 where there's a big giant green candle that had pushed to all-time high, right? Are we expecting November to do the same where you have a big giant green candle for November 2020? I think so. There are a lot of things for me to think that way. Even for November of 2016, just for exactly 4 years ago, you also had a God candle over here that had pushed through to all-time highs, right? So what gives? What are some of the market structure that allows this kind of thing to kind of happen? Well, let's talk about it. Currently, is price favorable to end up bouncing up to the arc up here around either 300 or 320, depending on where it hits by the end of 2025 or maybe even early 2026? The answer is yes, it's favorable because it has reclaimed the horizontal line over here from resistance to support and it's back tested it multiple times, right? Now, what is the resistance over here is preventing it from going up higher? Well, it is currently underneath the 0.786. If you're able to break above, and this goes with any assets, any stock in the index fund, if you're able to break above the 0.786, things generally go a lot higher. It's been rejected up here for about 4 months. But I think there are reasons to believe that it's going to push up a lot higher. The reason is really simple. Again, the IWM follows global liquidity very, very closely, plus or minus a few months or so. We just had a breakout above a horizontal resistance here, and we have breakout of the M2 money supply, right? So that means that most likely, plus or minus a few months, you're going to end up having a breakout of the IWM because it's just so cyclical. It's very sensitive to global liquidity. Last time when you had the God candle, you had a breakout of the global liquidity that was very clear, but that was kind of delayed maybe by like a few months or so, right? The time before that, with this God candle over here, you also had a breakout of this horizontal line over here. As you can see, that all of this is very sensitive to global liquidity. So I do think it's probably going to end up breaking above the 0.786 and it's going to go to like 300 or 320 depending where it hits. Remember I was talking about the 0.786, right? What happened during the last cycle? Well, let's do the cycle top over here and the cycle bottom and the COVID bottom. Where's the 0.786? It's these three candles over here. Very similar morphology currently and back then, potentially followed by a God candle after this, right? Who knows? I think it's entirely possible. What about the cycle before that? Let's look at the Fibonacci retracement levels over here. From the top, going to the bottom, you can see that it's trying to break above the 0.786, had a little bit of false breakup, broke back down, but when you really truly break above it, you made an all-time high and things just kept going for a very long time, right? So I think that it's going to happen. Another thing to make me think it's going to happen is, in addition to just being like a really good market structure where you flip resistance to support, and it just looks like it's ready. You also have a lot of different indicators to show you that you're ready too. I've been talking about this for like months now. You have the Ichimoku cloud, where whenever you bounce from a cloud after back testing it, things go pretty bullish, right? Bounce underneath the cloud here during COVID, came back down, back test the top of the cloud, went a lot higher. Back tested the top of the cloud, went a lot higher for like 3 years, right? Back tested the top of the cloud, went for like 3.5 years, So we just kind of went to the bottom of the cloud, came back tested the top of the cloud. Looks like we might be running a lot higher, right? The other thing is that you also have a nice separation between the Tenkin here, the blue line, and the red line after bullish cross. Bullish cross meaning that red crosses underneath the blue here, and that's a very bullish indication. You have the bullish cross that happened over here that led to a bullish trend for another year. You have a bullish cross over here that led to about 2 years of bull trend. You had a bullish cross over here that led to about 3 years of bull trend, right? So these things are basically telling me, hey, maybe we're just kind of at the beginning of this. Who knows? I don't know. Nobody knows for sure, but it's just something that's interesting. The Bollinger Band, you can see the 20-minute moving average has really been serving as resistance here and flipped it to support now, right? And you also have a negative sloping 20-minute moving average that turned positive sloping. You have the Bollinger Band expansion allowing price to potentially go a lot higher, right? Same thing happened last cycle. You have negative slope, turn positive slope, flip from resistance here to support, and things just kind of go a lot higher. You have Bollinger Band expansion that happened here very quickly. What happened last time over here, the cycle before that? Same thing, right? Negative sloping to flat, turn positive sloping, things went a lot higher. Bollinger Band expansion, right? These things happen over and over again. I think we are kind of still at the beginning to maybe early to mid bull cycle for the IWM. And I think it's probably going to go up a lot higher to 300, 320 to end the cycle. It just makes sense to me. And I think we're at the conjecture where we most likely will end up breaking out, and we end up going to have a very, very similar thing over here. Now, you might ask, why do I care about this? Well, I'm going to show you here in a little bit. Is there any other confluence to kind of tell you why I think November is going to be very similar to being back in 2020? Well, one thing is the yields. If you look at the yields here, I'm going to do a regular chart. A lot of people are really freaking about the 10-year yield. The rest of 2000 is full of these companies that need a lot of debt. They need to borrow money because they're growing. They're small companies. They're not like Microsoft or Apple. They have like an impeccable balance sheet. No, they are small caps. They need money, right? They need access to capital. So the 10-year, the lower the 10-year is, the better it is for these companies. Now, you did have a problem where October 2023, where 10-year yield has peaked around 5%, going all the way down to 3.6% last month. And this just went way too far, way too fast. It was just way outside the, well, actually it's not. But on the weekly here, it just kind of went way too far, way too fast, and it just needed to bounce. This is very much of a technical bounce here. So if you also look at the weekly here, I think it gives you a very clear picture. I think the 10-year yield most likely has topped again, right? It's just formed a lower high here again, because you had initially flipped the Ichimoku cloud from support over here, and you had a breakdown, and right now you're backtesting it for resistance, and it's getting rejected. So most likely the 10-year yield is going to go down. That also support the thesis where IWM could continue to go up. And I think the IWM is going to end up outperforming the large cap stocks that have been giving a lot of people a lot of gains. I think the way to look at it is just think about November 2020. What happened with QQQ in November 2020? It did have a bullish engulfing, but it wasn't like a really parabolic candle. The parabolic trend had already happened before that for months and months and months, right? This is a bullish candle, but it's not one of those candles that are just going to blow your mind like this one over here, right? Just something to kind of think about here. It did have a bullish continuation. We did end up having an everything rally that had happened for about a year after that. So whenever something like this happens, both large cap and small caps can benefit, but small caps generally run a little bit later in the cycle, and I think it's getting ready for that part of the cycle to happen. Very, very similar to what happened with QQQ, where QQQ just ran way too far, way too fast for about a year and a half, 2 years. And QQQ right now is at really key resistance, right? I'm going to make this a logarithmic scale here. is a really key resistance, because just look at the GAN here. The GAN has served as really great resistance and support zone during different cycles, right? You can see how nice symmetry you have with the GAN. Now, right now you're kind of trying to push about this GAN level here, is having a hard time doing so. There's also another thing that is also preventing price from going a lot higher for the QQQ, which is the 1.618 Fibonacci level. It's also very, very strong resistance levels in general. And it's just having a lot of hard time kind of push through it. Now, what do I think is going to happen next? I think it's a potential for price to end up having a green candle for November, but it may not necessarily be like a God candle by any means, not like IWM, what I anticipate to happen. I think it's probably going to push for all-time high either November, if not November, December. For the QQQ, probably going to be a little bit more muted response, just because it front ran it for so long now, that I think you might push against the 1.618. We'll see whether or not we're able to push above that in November. If not, I think we're going to end up pushing above to grab it up to higher levels, to the 2.618, and over the years, probably going to be even higher. But right now we're at resistance. So I think that QQQ is probably going to end up underperforming IWM, but they're still going to have some runways to go up. I think that the SPY is also going to end up underperforming too, because it's just finally get to a very key resistance here at the arc, as well as at the 1.618 Fibonacci level, which is going to be resistance, right? So you're talking about a lot of like confluence here to make you think, hey, maybe the small caps are going to end up running above, because you already got above a resistance level, back tested it. Maybe IWM is ready to make some God candles while the rest of the stuff can still follow up. That's just why I think that there's going to be an everything rally, right? Now, in addition to IWM, you also think about, if IWM goes bullish, a lot of the smaller cap and a lot of the really euphoric sentiment type stocks in crypto are going to do very well. What happened with Bitcoin back in November of 2020, right? Bitcoin in November 2020 did have a very nice candle, right? And it did end up challenging the previous all-time high. But the real candle that has really kind of started to break away was back in October, right? Before October, it's just been ranging sideways here, forming a cup and a handle, which actually looks like another cup. But before October 2020, there really isn't a whole lot of action going on, right? I think that the October 2020 candle is similar to October 2024 candle. And I think that you can have some bullish continuation for Bitcoin in the month of November, just based on where we are in the cycle. I think it's probably going to go going higher, right? How much higher? We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But so far, I just see a lot of similarities between the two. And when you're talking about this, I also would like to talk about, Ethereum as well. What happened in November of 2020? This is the breakaway candle. This looks just like IWM. And November 2020, after consolidating sideways here for 3 periods of months, it just made a great candle. It just pushed a lot further after that, right? What's happening right now? Well, we got a lot of consolidating sideways over here for a very long time. You got a very, very nice fork over here. It tells you there's a lot of demand underneath. And November's coming. We'll see whether or not we end up making a bullish engulfing candle that push all the way to like 4,000, either November or December, before a further bullish continuation. It would be nice if it happens. I don't guarantee it, but I just wonder, right? What happened with other Bitcoin related stocks? MSTR, the God candle was in November 2020. This is a true God candle, right? Are we going to have another one of those God candles for November 2024? I do not know. All I know is that the trend is looking extremely bullish right now. We are getting a little bit overextended here, but it is what it is, right? Coinbase. What is going on with Coinbase in November? We do not know, because we don't have an IPO until April 2021, so we don't know what the behavior of Coinbase is before, but it does look like a very, very nice reversal pattern here with a lot of very beautiful wicks over here. I'm excited about what Coinbase could potentially bring in the month of November. But if you're also just kind of looking at other miners, now there are only really 4 miners that have been kind of around during the last halving. So you can look at their behavior in terms of what they did. What happened in November 2020 for Mara? Mara had a God candle. It pushed like crazy, right? What happened with Bitfarms in November 2020, right? It had a God candle. Actually, this is December. It had a candle over here, not so much a God candle, but it really led to a God candle in December, right? And the other stocks would be HUD 8. What happened November 2020? Not the God candle, but you have a very nice candle, a breakaway candle to allow further bullish continuation, right? And then also finally, the other one that was around was Riot. Riot in November 2020 also had a God candle. So if you end up having a God candle IWM, that basically means that miners are going to do extremely well. We'll see, because I do think that they share a very similar pool of liquidity. So if one does well, I think the other one's going to also do very well. I think that I'm going to probably just leave it as it is. I'm not going to go through too much detail. I just think that something big is happening. And if you're holding higher risk assets like crypto, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, like Bitcoin miners, or any of the IWM stuff, I think you're going to probably end up outperforming the S&P 500 and outperforming the Nasdaq, if what I'm seeing here is correct. Well, you might say, hey, listen, Kat, did you see the price action for Thursday? It was absolutely horrendous. How can you make a statement like this? Well, I'm looking at a monthly chart. The plus or minus 10-15% moves that you see doesn't really affect the overall structure. I still think that over here is a very, very similar part of the cycle over here, even though Riot has been severely underperformed, so it may not be a good comparison, but I do think that Mara over here is very similar to over here. If you want to watch this as to why I think that, I made a whole video about how I think Mara is going to the moon. I just think that from the Ichimoku perspective, they look very similar, right? And also from the weekly moving averages, I think if you do like a 100 here, it's almost it's like so beautiful. I just have to show this again. If you just do the 100 moving average, you can see how each cycle, whenever the last cycle here flipped the 100 moving average, it just went a lot higher. We just had that happen, right? This is trend exhaustion and breaking down underneath, got rejected here initially, broke through, back test, potentially going a lot higher after that. I really do see Mara going to some pretty high prices. And I do wonder whether or not November is going to be the month, because there's a lot of similar morphology over here as opposed to over here. It's just a lot of, it's just the cycle maybe just a little bit slower. But overall, the structures are still very similar to the last cycle. And that's why I call them cycles, right? And I do also want to kind of go through in terms of other large cap stocks. I'm probably going to end there, right? Why do I say that the small cap stocks can outperform like an Apple, for example, right? Let's go to the monthly chart here. I'm going to allow my drawing here. And what do you see? Apple is it did break above the 1.618, which is good, but it's at an arc resistance, having a hard time breaking through. Microsoft, what is it doing? It's an arc resistance, having a hard time breaking through. It couldn't even break above the 1.618, unlike Apple. Well, what about Tesla? Tesla is a little bit of a different story. I actually think this is more of a cyclical stock, and this probably follows the IWM a lot more. What happened in November 2020? In November 2020, let's see, you have a very strong candle over here, bullish engulfing over here, but it already ran up a lot before that, right? I do think that this is going to be a little bit more cyclical. You're going to end up having a little bit of outperformance than, let's say, the QQQ back in the days. I think you're going to end up having a lot more outperformance of Tesla just because it's just gone sideways for too long, right? What about Amazon? What happened in November 2020? Nothing. It's just been going sideways here. They already front ran, and it's been distributing ever since, right? Right now, I think that we still have room to kind of go up, but right now it's still kind of underneath resistance here. It's not doing a whole heck of a lot. Meta looks better. It's trying to break above the 1.618, but it probably is being dragged down by liquidity from like large caps. Nvidia is also looking pretty decent. You basically break through an arc. I think it's going to end up gravitating up here, but you might end up having some slowdown here, kind of like how it has slowed down over here before going up a lot further, right? What happened for Nvidia for November 2020? Nothing. It went sideways for 4 months after that. While the small caps, while Bitcoin, while everything else went beast mode, right? Are we going to potentially end up having the same thing where you're still going to be stuck in your resistance over around 140? And the small caps does extremely well. Nvidia got stuck in the range there. Possible, right? I do think eventually, whenever this breaks, it's going to end up grabbing up to like the 350 zone. I think that's probably going to be where the cycle ends. But before that, I think small caps probably need to be rotated into first. Google got rejected at 1.618, right? So you have all these themes here that tells you that large caps has ran a lot already and is hitting resistance, and it might need to cool down for a little bit further. The 10-year yield is hitting resistance, and the IWM looks like it's ready to break out. So I guess, just think about how you want to position yourself properly. I do think that it may be more sensible at these parts, and none of this is financial advice, by the way. It might be a little bit more sensible for me to allocate things into more higher risk assets like Coinbase, MicroStrategy, Bitcoin miners, so on and so forth, right? I think it might be better to allocate into those kinds of things where we are in the cycle. But I already have done that. I already told you I've spent like a year already doing that, and it's been extremely painful while I was doing it because stocks like Mara did like nothing for almost the entire year. But that's okay. I think something big is probably happening. I think November candles are very similar to November candles from 4 years ago across the board. It just makes you wonder whether or not the 4-year cycle is real, whether or not the 4-year cycle is not it doesn't have so much to do with Bitcoin halving, but just global liquidity in general. Anyway, I think this video is getting a little bit long here. I'm going to end it here. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.